again to our show that is called Real Shame. It's a show where we watch movies from our movie list of shame or movie blind spots, basically movies that we haven't seen yet. So we're fixing that for you guys today. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
Earlier in the week, we watched the movie that Andy chose that I've never seen called Lamora, Child's Tale of the Supernatural. And he decided to pair it with another movie. And I'm going to have him tell you all about it.
Valerie lives with her Valerie, call me. Sorry. Valerie lives with her grandmother in a small village where the fantastic appears to be commonplace, with vampires, actors, missionaries, and others milling about the town in Valerie and Her Week of Wonders.
Babička příšera.
Oh, Valerie and Her Week of Wonders was released in 1970. It's a Czechoslovakian film directed by Jaromil Jiřeš, written by Esther Krumbachova, Jaromil Jiřeš, and Jiří Musil. It's based on a book by Vítězslav Nezval, which from reading, looks like the book was written around 1935, but for whatever reason, it didn't get published until 1945, is what I read. It stars Yaroslava Shalarova as Valerie, Helena Anizova as Elsa, who's like her grandmother. She also plays like her mother at one point in the movie. Yeah. She plays her cousin, kind of, or she pretends to be her cousin. Peter Kopriva plays Orlik, or Eaglet, as Valerie calls him. And Jiří Primek plays the constable, who's kind of like a vampire. He got some Bubba teeth.
He's got some very British teeth.
Yeah, he's got some messed up looking teeth. He plays the constable. You've probably never heard of any of those people. I haven't. I haven't seen that many films from Czechoslovakia, so I don't recognize any of these people. But anyways, hopefully I didn't butcher their names too badly. As I mentioned at the end of Monday's show, this is yet another movie that I have seen once before. I rented it back in the days when I used to get discs in the mail from Netflix. I've since switched to doing the only streaming, but back when I used to get discs from Netflix, I rented this along with Lamora. Not back to back or anything like that, but over the course of time that I got discs from Netflix, I saw both of those movies on DVD. But this is a movie that you've never seen. And I guess just like Lamora, probably never heard of, unless you're familiar with all the Criterion Collection releases, because it is in the Criterion Collection now. So, you weren't all that favorable on Lamora. How did Valerie fare in your estimation?
That's a good question. So these movies this kind of movie is not really necessarily my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Because it's more, it's definitely like, I would give it like a Picnic at Hanging Rock kind of vibe to it, where it's less about a story. It's less about the story or things happening. It's more about a vibe and like showing you some interesting visuals, but just kind of giving you this kind of feeling why it has you and why you're sitting there paying attention, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So those usually kind of leave me cold. I think the movie's visually very interesting and shot really well, and definitely a step up from Lamora. Since we're watching them back, since we kind of watched them, in the same week and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a improvement there on that stuff. So for me, the movie's just kind of like okay. There's nothing again that I could really like write home about. Nothing in the movie really stands out to me as something like that I'm like, oh, this is an interesting idea, or this is something I want to continue like doing, or any of that kind of stuff. It's just the thing that stood out the most to me was just how it was shot and how interesting it was. But it is kind of all over the place a little bit. But again, you're kind of following this younger person, so it makes sense that it's a little chaotic in the storytelling, and it's really just about all the machinations she has and all the things that are going on in the town and all that kind of stuff. And are these people really vampires? Are they not? Kind of stuff. Is it in her head?
Yeah.
Are they magic earrings that make her see things? All that stuff.
Put a pearl in your mouth and you'll be protected.
Yep. So for me, it left me a little cold, but like I said, it's not anything against this movie. It's just these kind of movies aren't really my cup of tea. So that's kind of where I fell with Valerie and her Weekenders. I thought it was good to look at.
Yeah.
So that's me. I mean, I wish I had more to kind of get into and talk about, but that's just kind of where I'm at with the movie. So I'm gonna jump it over to you. So you said you rented this back in the day. People
Yeah.
used to say back in the day when Blockbuster's around, but you're back in the day when you could only rent movies
Yeah.
via mail from
That's
Netflix.
right. Only rent movies. And you remember they like if you were watching on, because I remember on my, what was it, the Wii, like you got like a Netflix disc for
Yes,
the
so
Wii
you
or
could
for the
watch it.
PS3 or whatever was out at the
So you
time.
could
So
watch it streaming.
yes, yeah.
It was like a video game.
Yeah, you put in
disc.
the disc. It was like, don't throw this disc away. Like, put it in, like, I don't know what. Yeah, the good old days. Yeah. So I did see this movie before. I remember when I watched it back then. I thought it was. I mean, even back then, I thought it was a step up from Lamora, and I agree, it is a step up from Lamora. I mean, just production wise, it's just.
Yeah.
You could tell. I mean, Jaromir Juris, I didn't mention, but he was one of the filmmakers that's considered part of the Czech New Wave, and he made a lot of films. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not like Richard Blackburn or whoever the guy was that I said directed Lamora. He made a lot of movies. That guy only made one. He made a lot of movies, and so he definitely knew what he was doing. And I agree with you. I think the cinematography in this movie is really good, and every shot I feel like is very kind of artfully composed. I mean, he definitely had an eye for what he wanted in making this film. Yeah, this movie, it's not the kind of movie that you just sit down and you're like, I'm prepared to be like super entertained. It's
Yeah.
not a popcorn movie. It's nothing like that. It's very much an art film. It's very much a work of art, and I think on that level it succeeds very well. I mean, I think it's very beautiful to look at. The music, whatever. It's all good. You and I both kind of noticed that. Well, at least with a Criterion disc, that there's an alternate soundtrack.
Oh, that's the one that first started
Yeah,
playing
like
when I
by
watched
default.
it.
Yeah,
That
you're
was
like,
my
what
default.
the?
I was like,
what is this?
I thought it was just gonna be like, no dialogue,
Yeah,
just rock music.
yeah. And then you were like, wait, let me check and see if
Yeah,
there's
let me
another
see
one.
if I'm doing something wrong.
But I mean, as far as like the music and everything, I think it's good. The performances, whatever. Again, they're speaking a language that I don't understand. I assume they're doing pretty good. But yeah, this movie definitely, I found it confusing. Like I was like, wait, who's what? Because there's a lot of like, he's telling her that the constable is this person, and
Yeah.
the priest is telling her that you guys are brother and sister, and whatever and stuff like that. So it's all very surreal and very dreamlike and everything, and it basically just kind of flits from one scene to the next without any transition. So you'll have a scene where Valerie will be in her room and she'll be maybe looking up at the ceiling or something like that. And then it'll cut to her like eating with the priest at a
Yeah.
table outdoors with people like basically molesting each other. A man and a woman
Yeah.
basically tearing each other's clothes off over here in the field. And there's no transition. You don't
Yeah.
see Valerie like start to leave her room, and then maybe you see a shot of her walking through the town, and then you see her sitting. She's on the bed, now she's eating with a priest.
Yeah.
Now she's in the catacombs looking at, now she's over here. Now Orlick is over doing, so it's just like, wait a minute, this is all, but I guess that's supposed to be that way.
Yeah.
It's supposed to just be again
Dreamlike.
this dreamlike and
Yeah.
this very, very crazy kind of film. But I mean, I would say I like it overall, but again, this is not a movie that I'm going to sit down and watch like all the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, again, I mean, I don't know that I will watch it anymore. I mean, I've seen it a couple of times. Again, I like it just fine, but I like it more than I admire it. I admire the cinematography. I admire the kind of artfulness of everything. But yeah, as a movie, as like an entertaining movie, I'm not like, oh, this is amazing,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult to kind of watch and or review a film like this, but it's definitely, the production value and everything is much higher than Lamora.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And I think if you want something that has like a vibe to it, that's interesting, that's dreamlike, that's
Yeah.
kind of nice to look at, then this would be, something to seek out, right?
right, you put it on the Criterion's Blu-ray disc is really great. It looks really fantastic. I mean, it looks a lot better than when I saw it on DVD. I will say the ending of Valerie Valerie and Her Week of Wonders reminded me a little bit of 8.5. Like all of the people in her life basically are
Yeah.
around her, like joining hands in a
Yep.
circle, and she lays like there's like a bed just in the middle of the forest, and she lays down, and they're all kind of dancing around and singing, and everybody's happy, and then they all disappear, and she's just there. So that does not happen in 8.5. But the part about all the people
Yeah. Like,
making a circle around her, and they're all kind of
yeah,
joining
yeah.
hands. It's like all the people that have intersected her life within her week of wonders. But yeah, just like Lamora, this is basically about a young girl kind of coming of age and becoming a woman and all that kind of stuff. And kind of like in Lamora, a lot of people seem to lust after Valerie
That's right.
in this film, from the constable
Including
to the priest,
her grandmother.
her grandmother,
Grandmother slash mom.
everybody, grandmother slash mom slash cousin,
Yeah.
all of it. So it's super surreal. Don't expect to take it literally at all. I mean, there's one part where Valerie is accused of being a witch by the priest who basically tried to rape her. She gets burned at the stake, but because she swallows the pearl or whatever, she's miraculously unharmed. So that's the sort of thing to expect from this movie,
Yep,
I would say. But yeah, if you're in the mood, like you said, if you're in the mood to just kind of vibe with something, just kind of put something on, ambiance, whatever, you could do probably a lot worse than this film.
I agree.
It's 80% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, 79% audience score. Obviously, no Siskel and Ebert. No, I didn't see it in Leonard Maltin's book, but it's 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb. Take that with a grain of salt, whatever. Take that for what it's worth.
Gotcha.
Because as you mentioned last time, most people rate movies either 1 or 10.
Yeah.
Or 1 or 10 is how I should say it. So.
All right. Yeah, I agree. It's just there's now 70% more people rating it a 10 versus 1, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's how math works. Okay, that was Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. On these Wednesday episodes, we like to answer viewers' questions. And since both these movies, although they're both about young girls coming of age, they also feature vampires in various forms in them. So we decided, and now that we're coming out of Halloween, to talk about what are some vampire movies we feel are underrated. And so we've kind of looked at a couple lists, looked at a couple things to pull that together. I will always say that my favorite underrated werewolf movie is Dog Soldiers.
Huh.
I will scream that from the top of the hills. I really like that movie. Vampire movies, though, I feel like are more popular than werewolf movies. There's more of them. And it was hard. I was scratching my head a little bit trying to figure out what is an underrated one. We did a Vampire Week the first week of October this year, where we did Nosferatu, Near Dark, and Dracula.
Yeah.
And I will say I really like Near Dark. I know you weren't as big a fan of it.
No, yeah.
But I think that was a gem. That was a find for me. So I'm glad we were able to do that and watch that. I like that.
Yeah.
And then what about the Spanish version of Dracula? That's what you said. That was really good.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you check that out, whether or not you're a fan of the Bela Lugosi one, I think it's worth seeing the Spanish language version one.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Actually, speaking of that, the week that we talked about Nosferatu, I talked to somebody a few weeks after that had, I think, just recently seen Nosferatu for the first time, and they loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's very cool.
Yeah, that's where I was, because I liked Nosferatu better than Dracula. I thought it was very interesting and very cool.
Yeah. So I guess we looked through a few different lists, because I can't magically spring these up from my head. I had to look at what some other people said. It seemed like there was a lot of commonality in some of these lists, and some of them I'm like, is that a vampire movie?
Yeah,
I'm not so sure.
You always got to take stuff like that with a grain of salt. Is that the saying?
Yeah.
And stuff we say you got to take with a grain of salt too. So.
Yeah, totally. I did see a couple of lists mention Near Dark. One movie that was mentioned on at least one of these lists is a movie called The Addiction, directed by Abel Ferrara and starring Lily Taylor, and I think Christopher Walken's in it. I haven't seen that in a while, but I do remember liking it, and it's shot in black and white.
Oh, that's cool.
And it looks great. It's on Blu-ray now. I haven't watched the Blu-ray of it, so when I saw it, I was probably VHS back in the day, but I remember thinking it was a very unique kind of take on vampire movies. I thought it was pretty cool, so I need to revisit that. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember it being cool. Another underrated one I saw in here, and I actually meant to mention this. I think whenever we were filming the vampire movies that we did for Halloween, but there's Carl Theodore Dreyer did a movie called Vampire, Vampyr, back in the early 30s, which I think you should check out because
Okay.
I think you would like it. He does some cool early kind of special effects and stuff in it. I think it's a very interesting. Again, I don't know about underrated, but I did see that on one of the lists.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So for me, is that so?
Well, I've got two that I'll mention, but you go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, the first thing that came to mind, and I don't know if this is underrated or it's definitely not little known, but I like Blade Trinity a whole lot with Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that one.
I like it better than the Guillermo del Toro directed Blade 2, honestly.
2, yeah.
I know that one's loved by the critics because it's so zany, but for me, it just breaks the universe and not good at all. So I like Blade Trinity a lot. So I don't know. It's probably critically maligned, but I like it. For me, it was one that we saw on the list, and I just mentioned the director of it. One of the movies that I really like, that I was really surprised that I liked, and I saw this years ago. It's a vampire movie that I don't know if a lot of people know about. It's Kronos, which is has one of my favorite scenes in a movie when he licks the blood off the tile floor. I think it's so cool. The tile's so stark white and like the blood's so red. It looks very cool. It has Ron Perlman in it.
Yeah.
It's just
frequent Guillermo del Toro collaborator Ron Perlman.
Yeah. So for me, it'd be Kronos because I mean Kronos has like a Criterion release, so it might not be underrated in that aspect because of it.
Well, but I still, if you ask the average person about Kronos, they're not gonna know what the hell you're talking about. So I would say so.
But I still haven't seen like his other movie, Devil's Backbone. I heard was good. Yeah. So not a vampire movie to my knowledge.
No, it's not.
But yeah. So for me, that Kronos is the one that stuck out the most. So I'm gonna toss it over to you. What are your two?
Yeah, so they were both from maybe from the same list. I can't remember, but so one is kind of a pseudo vampire movie, and I think I mentioned it before. Maybe I feel like we talked about Nicolas Cage movies at one point. I don't know because now that I'm thinking, did we ever do a Nicolas Cage movie? Have we done a Nicolas Cage movie on the show?
He was in Moonlight.
Moonstruck. Yeah,
Moonstruck. Maybe we also did the National Treasure movie.
Yeah, so maybe we talked about it then, but it's a movie where he thinks he's a vampire from the late 80s called Vampire's Kiss, which I think is a really good and funny movie. I couldn't stand it when I originally saw it back then because I don't think I got it.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw it back then, I was a little too young maybe, but and when I watched it later, I was like, okay, I know what they're going for here. I know what they're doing in this movie, and it works for me. I think that's a really fun and funny movie with a the first of many batshit crazy performances by Nicolas Cage. Yeah. So I would recommend Vampire's Kiss. But the movie that I saw on one of these lists that stood out to me, which I remember watching it a few years ago, and I really liked it, is Larry Fessenden's movie called Habit, which came out in the mid-90s, something like that. Larry Fessenden is well known to horror movie enthusiasts because he's pretty much just associated with that genre. He's made a lot of horror movies on his own, directed them, acted in them. Here lately, I feel like he's acted in a ton of horror films that I've seen in recent years. But Habit is a very low budget, I believe it's based in New York, a very low budget New York vampire movie that I just really enjoyed. I thought it was, again, I mean, you could tell it's low budget. Yeah. Don't expect any elaborate sets or production values or anything like that. But it just really, really worked for me. Like, I was super, super mesmerized by it when I saw it. Cool. Mesmerized as though I was looking at Bela Lugosi's eyes. He was doing the stare, and I was like, yes, master.
Yes, master.
But yeah, no, I really liked Habit a lot. So I would say Habit and Vampire's Kiss are two more underrated, especially Habit. Yeah. But Vampire's Kiss is also another kind of underrated
vampire movie. Think I've ever heard of Habit, so that's cool. I'll have to check that out. All right, anything else?
That's it.
All right, that was our favorite underrated vampire movies. Please let us know what your favorite underrated vampire movie is. Leave it in a comment down below. Maybe it's one we mentioned. Maybe it's one we haven't heard of.
Maybe it's Valerie and her Week of Wonders or Lamora.
Yeah, there you go. Let us know. We won't know unless you comment. So you got to comment. So that was everything. Lamora, we're not doing no more. That's everything Valerie, her Week of Wonders, and more. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that social media stuff. It really does help. We really do appreciate it. And stay tuned next week as we watch some movies from this guy's list of shame. And we'll see you soon. Have a good one. Bye.